And I'm here with my longtime friend and musical partner, Andres Ferrero.
Hey, this is Andres Ferrero. I'm the drummer on the Broadway show Hamilton.
I'm the guitar player with Steve Smith and Vital Information, and the musical director for the Drum Fantasy Camp and Play Along Tunes.
I have a deep love for guitars, and I'm grateful to be a part of this new show with Vinny.
The show is
called Guitars and Memoirs, so thanks for joining our show.
Talking all things guitar with the guitarists that make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the program, Rodney Jones. Wow, what a pleasure it is to have Rodney as part of this show, Guitars and Memoirs.
Welcome, Rodney.
I'm glad to be here, you guys.
Thanks for taking time out of your evening to spend with us and share some stories.
Happy to do it.
We know you'd usually be on Facebook playing for the Guinness World Book of Records for 2.5 hours or however long your wife lets you.
You're not lying, Vinny.
Throughout the pandemic, you know, the malls have been closed, so he's been able to do it much longer hours.
Yeah,
exactly.
Rodney, we have, there's just a lot of stuff to cover here, and I think probably best if we start with, the very beginning of your career with the guitar. Talk us through a little bit how it all started, what guitar you had.
It started like this. And it started with me trying to play Day Tripper on one string. True story. And then like 2 months later, it occurred to me, and I was like, oh my God, I can play it. It wasn't on one string. I started playing guitar at 6 years old. When my father was a teacher, his students gave him a guitar, cheap, brand X guitar. Actually, it was a Stella guitar.
I remember that. I remember that brand.
Well, I played it for, I just, basically, I learned This Land Is Your Land, and, I learned, basic open D chords and G and C, and then I went on the road with Pete Seeger.
Oh, wow.
It sounds like it's a joke, right? But it's not actually a joke. I actually did play with Pete Seeger.
Wow.
So, playing those kind of things and playing This Land Is Your Land and, whatever tunes we played. I don't remember what they were, but whatever they were, If I Had a Hammer and all those kind of things. And so I found myself, getting relatively okay at the guitar. I started playing Beatle tunes, and I played, Help and Hard Day's a Night and those kind of things. And I started really getting into Jimi Hendrix, and Alvin Lee and Johnny Winter and groups like that. And Grand Funk Railroad and stuff like that. So I was into all that stuff and playing that way and wanting to play that way. And I was pretty good at playing, like that kind of, and then I discovered like James Brown stuff. and I didn't know that there were two guitar players, so I learned to play both parts.
Whoa.
Which, when I actually did my first gig with James Brown, he told his manager, he said, we gotta hire him because we can fire one guitar player. I heard him say that to the manager, really, for real. I was playing things like this. Or not realizing like there was one guy going, the other guy was going. I was going. Or it didn't occur to me that the bass was covering. Like I just had to go. But I was.
Wow.
So, all those things. And all of the R&B stuff, so I, all that kind of stuff, and of course the blues. I got into all that, and then it all changed because I heard Barney Kessel play.
Oh yeah.
And I heard that on, at the time, what was the radio station, WRVR, which was a jazz radio station in New York. And I went upstairs and got my Gibson SG, took it out, and was like, wait a minute. I know those notes are on my guitar, but I can't find any of them. So that began my search for like jazz guitar. And that was it.
Wow. That's incredible.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was about 15 when I started really getting interested in jazz, and I took some lessons from a guy named Alex Pasquale, who was a Haitian guitar player who played fingerstyle.
Yeah.
And then I took some 3 lessons from Al Gaffa, who was Dizzy Gillespie's guitarist. But my main teacher was Bruce Johnson, who was a kind of a really eccentric, legendary New York guitarist, African-American guy. But was remarkable, like a real guitar genius, a savant, like, a George Benson type of savant, but just really eccentric and really like Sun Ra played jazz guitar, that kind of thing,
Wow.
And, but he at 15, he said, look, I'm going to show you what to do. If you do what I tell you and you do it the way I tell you, you're going to be able to play guitar, And I was like, well, at that time I wanted to be a limnologist, which is a person who studies ponds and inland streams, And so I said, no, Bruce, I want to be a limnologist. He said, limnologist, what's that? I said, oh, it's someone who studies ponds and inland streams. And he looks at me like, I was like, turtles? And he said, let me ask you a question, Rodney. Do you think you'll get more girls with a guitar or with a turtle? So he's talking to a teenage boy, with raging hormones. I'm like, turtle guitar? Turtle guitar? I was like, yeah, I'm just playing guitars. Forget the turtles, So, so he really started teaching me. And I was good enough at 17. I was playing with Jackie Bayard, the pianist and saxophonist. At 18, I was playing with Chico Hamilton.
Wow.
Just shy of my 19th birthday, I started playing with Dizzy Gillespie.
Jeez.
Wow.
So he showed me the fundamentals of the most important things. He showed me how to swing and how to comp, because his thing was like, it's great to be a great soloist, but in order to be employable, no matter who, you've got to feel good when you're comping behind them. No one's going to hire you if they don't like the way you feel when you're playing for them, which made a lot of sense. Like, they'll tolerate your solo not being great if when they're playing it, you're killing it.
Yeah.
So he really trained me to play chords and to feel good, to swing in the pocket and all that. And so, I started playing with those people, and, I got with Dizzy Gillespie, and, I realize now, like, Dizzy clearly didn't hire me because I was a virtuoso, soloist like that. I mean, I played okay, but I wasn't like all that. But the thing I had was, when it was time to swing, I had that. So, Joe Pass wasn't going to do that better than me.
Yeah.
Benson wasn't going to do that better. They're way more developed guitar players. I mean, no comparison. But if you're talking about if swing is the measure, and comping is the measure, then I was in the same zone as them. I think George was more developed, of course, but the point is, I worked a lot cheaper.
Yeah. It's amazing how that works. And it brings me to the, you're talking about your history and what gets you to that point. It's a very similar one to my experience. Around 16, I could play everything that I heard on the radio, the same kind of music, acoustic guitar, you name it, Zeppelin, Hendrix. I played it, and I heard George Benson. For me, it was hearing George for the first time, and I had that experience that you did, man. I came home and I picked up the guitar and went, wait a minute, some of these notes don't seem to be here. What is he doing? I actually turned to a friend of mine who was a guitarist, and I said, does he have a doubler or something that makes him play that fast? I never heard anybody play like that.
Yeah. George was a guitar player that made me want to quit guitar.
Yeah.
And he really did. No, it's not a joke. I went to hear him. He was playing at the Bottom Line in New York. Stan Getz with his opening act.
That must have been. And
this was in like early 70s, maybe 73.
I was going to say.
74 in that zone, And George played, and he was at the peak of his skill.
His chops,
I remember walking to the subway after the concert, and I was like, you know what? I'm never going to be able to do that. Like, I can't even imagine being able to do that.
Yeah.
So what's the point? If I can't even reach that kind of excellence and do anything like that, why should I do it? And just before I got on the subway, it's like a light went off. It was just like one of those defining moments in my life. And I said, I asked myself this question. I said, what's the only thing I can do that George Benson can't do? And it occurred to me, it's like, he can't be you. If I just do myself and do that as best I can, there'll be people that I'll meet that George is never going to meet. There are people that are going to hear me that are never going to hear him. That I can find my way by just doing me the best I can, as opposed to trying to do him the best I can. And if I do me the best I can, then the guitar will take care of itself. Whatever I need to do me the best will be okay. And so that's when I felt like, wow. And then me wanting to burn all my instruments turned into inspiration, because then I'm like, man, I want to be me as good as he's him.
Wow.
So now went from being like the guy that makes me want to quit to being like this idealized thing of like, it is possible to play guitar that great. It is possible to swing that hard, to be that musical. Like, it's possible. And I know because I've seen it. Just like I saw Kenny Burrell play a ballad, play a night where he played almost all ballads. And I remember thinking like, wow, it is possible to play ballads with that much soul and feeling. Like, I never heard it done like that before. I was like, it just showed me what was possible. Like hearing Wes play octaves, you hear it and you see a video of it and you realize, wow, it can be done.
Yeah.
And so, it was really inspiring just to see it done. Nathan Page, guitarist, like with intervals, playing all the fourths and fifths. I saw Nathan do that. I was like, man, it can be done.
It can be done.
And that was basically it. And I think for Vinny and myself, we become that for other people now, because I have lots of young guitar players, and they hear the way I play, I say, wow, I didn't know you could really do that. And now I know it can be done like that. And I'm like, yeah.
You mentioned defining moments, and I was wondering if you would mark the top 5 defining moments in your guitar career, what would they be?
Great question. Never been asked that question before. In no particular order. Asked by Dizzy Gillespie to join his group is like, I was in college at City College, and I asked John Lewis, who was the head of the program there from the MJQ. I said, Dizzy asked me to join his band. What should I do? And he said, under no circumstances you should leave school to join college, to join Dizzy. And I asked my father. My father said, under no circumstances should you leave school to play with Dizzy Gillespie. And I sat on the edge of my bed, and I remember thinking, like, would I learn more about jazz from people that teach it or the guy that invented it?
That's it.
And I decided, I'm going to play with Dizzy Gillespie. School's going to be there. Yeah. So I went and played with Dizzy for 3 years. That was really one to find. Another one was when I got the job playing for Lena Horne, because I'd never played with a singer of that stature before. I mean, I played with Sarah Vaughan a little bit, but Lena was like Coltrane of vocals. She was just her knowledge and nuance of subtlety in music was like Miles playing. You know, every song was like Blue and Green. Everything she sang was Blue and Green. So it forced me to have to learn to do that and to be that. You know, and the story that goes along with that is that we were rehearsing at her house. I'm Glad There Was You, that song, and she said make an intro, and that's in the first chord's in G major. So I played. She said, no, that's wrong. And I said, oh. She said, try it again. So I played. And she said, no, that's wrong. They tried again. I was like. She said, no, that's wrong. And now here I am. I'm fully formed as a jazz musician at this point. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's called 3-6-2-5. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Are those the chords that connect to the first breath I take before I sing the first word? Are those the chords that express the feeling of the first line of the melody? Are those chords in any way connected to you're going into the bridge? Or are they just chords?
Wow.
You know, she was like all about the lyric and the breath of like, do you know the lyric and where I would pause and what it would mean? So she's like waiting for me to play into her in this world of ordinary. So I played this for her. I played. She said, you got it, because I played. She could.
Right.
Wow.
But that had never occurred. I never played with any jazz musicians that, jazz musicians, you make an intro and the band comes in.
Right.
She was so not about that. She was like, no, nuance matters. Like a breath matters. Do you leave the space open for the breath? Do you know where I'm breathing? Are you leaving those spaces open? When are you leading me? When am I leading you? How is that working? When should you be soft and I get loud? When should I be soft and you get louder?
Wow.
When should you fill in and I don't fill? It's like this was the world she lived in, and I had never been exposed to that. So that's one. Dizzy, Lena. I would have to say playing with Maceo Parker, because as someone who grew up listening to Maceo for all the James Brown records, to find myself on Maceo's first arguably jazz record, Roots Revisited, along with Fred Wesley, and who's God on the trombone, and Pee Wee Ellis, who James Brown's music director and wrote "I Feel Good" and "Cold Sweat," and all. And I find myself in the studio with Don Pullen on organ and Bill Stewart on drums, and and just the three of us and them, and we played this music, and I remember thinking like, wow, this has gone full circle. Like I remember listening at 14, 15 to that, and listening to Maceo and being like, oh my God, this is like, what is this even? And now I'm in the studio recording with Maceo Parker. It was unreal. It was really surreal. So that's another one. Another one was when I got signed by Blue Note Records. I had been producing Lena Horne's records. And at the time, I think Bob Belden was at Blue Note. And so I was producing Lena stuff, and I was playing good on it. And so what's his name? Tom Everett, who was at Blue Note, came by, and he said, why haven't you recorded for Blue Note? And I was like, you're the vice president of A&R, Tom. Why haven't I recorded? He said, well, call me in a couple of weeks. I called him, and I got signed to Blue Note. So then that led me to do 3 records for them, 2 of which have been released. 1 has not been released. And so I did Undiscovered Few, which had, Shedrick Mitchell. I called Kenny Kirkland. He had died that week when I was going to.
Oh, man.
But I had Eric Harlan and Lonnie Plaxico and Shedrick Mitchell and Mike Rinsey and Tim Higgins and Donald Harrison and,
couldn't find anybody, huh?
Yeah, Lewis Nash. And it was, good. Ben Brown played on stuff. So it was a good record. And then the Soul Manifesto, I said, well, I'm going to do the funky record. And Bruce Lumble, who was the president at the time, said, Rodney, if you do a funky record, you'll you'll alienate your jazz audience. This is in a meeting about doing this record. So I said to him without missing a beat, he said, oh, don't worry. He won't mind. Like, what jazz audience? Who are you talking about? And he laughed. So I did it. So I ended up doing the record with Maceo Parker on my record with Dr. Lonnie Smith on organ. Because in my mind, I was like, who would I want to combine? If I could hear Lonnie Smith and Maceo, who never played together and never met, like that to me was like, for all the wrong, right reasons, I wanted them to meet. And Idris Muhammad on drums.
Wow.
Who played on all the Grant Green records and all those.
Sure.
I'm like, man, this is like, and then I got Arthur Blythe on alto because Arthur was so soulful, but he was really avant-garde. I'm like, man, who's the best avant-garde against the best soul guy? And so I thought that would be a really interesting pairing, And then I had Lonnie Plaxico go play bass on it.
Wow.
And it was amazing. I mean, when Maceo came into the studio, Arthur Blythe was warming up and he was playing all those like, Wild Sun Ra, Albert Ayler stuff. And Maceo listened. I was standing in the door and Maceo listened. He's like, he looked at me and said, you do know how I play, don't you? I said, no, don't worry, Maceo. We're playing funky music. Just do you, man. Arthur's going to be just fine. Don't worry about that. And it was fine. It came out to be a really great record. It was a good project. So is that 5 so far? Or how many is that?
I think so.
Yeah. So that was it. I think those are the big, I mean, there's lots of moments, but I think those are big moments for me. Yeah.
I was hip to you really early on, but I think what made me, I've always liked the way you played. I've always kind of felt like your personality shines through in every note that you play, and who you are as a person comes through too. But those records, the records with Jimmy McGriff, I had to study those because out of my when I graduated from Howard University, it was the same kind of thing. The year before I graduated, Jimmy McGriff had called, or his manager had called, and said, Jimmy wants you to join the band. And I said, man, I have a year left in school. I think I want to go ahead and finish. And she said, well, think about it and get back to us in a couple of weeks. And I said, I listened to a bunch of his stuff and I thought about it. And, I kind of felt guilty leaving school to join a band, even though that was the dream, And you know what George said to me?
What?
Because he was the one who got me the gig. He was the one who recommended me for the gig. He said, Jimmy will be there next year too. And he was, man. I mean, it was like deja vu. And he went and finished up the rest of the year with I forget who was playing with him at the time, but
Don, the drummer.
Don Williams was in the band when I joined the band. But yeah, that's what happened there. And I got hip to you really through the details of what you were playing and what I had to play, from listening to those records that you had done with them.
Yeah, I thank you, Vinny. I mean, I love playing with Jimmy McGriff because it swung and, and plus he was quirky and, I like the humor. So I found there was an entertainment value to me in doing the gig because I found it to be fun, and funny. And it was good to be working and playing with that, with one of the OGs of the organ too.
Yeah.
But I love playing with McGriff, and with Hank Crawford did a lot of those gigs too.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to do that. We did some great gigs. I met a lot of great players through Jimmy, but it served to sort of bolster my credentials in that area because you can play, like we play with Dizzy, obviously you can play jazz. You play with Jimmy McGriff, obviously you can swing and groove like nothing else because you couldn't be on the gig if you couldn't. So once you do, play with Maceo, what, I can't play funk? I mean, come on. So once you do those kind of gigs, there, Lena Horne, I don't know how to play it for a singer. Those are the gigs that define, they answer all the questions about, well, can the guy do, is the guy this, who's the guy? So, that was a good thing. I didn't do it for that reason, but afterwards I realized that had given me a credibility, a leg up, so that when I played with Jimmy Smith, I was prepared. Because I played with Lonnie Smith too, and I played with McGriff, and I played with Jimmy and Lonnie together, and I played with Joey DeFrancesco and all the organ players, of the time. But Jimmy Smith was something different than all of them.
Yeah,
I prepared to play with him through the others.
Yeah, and I think we've spoke about this before, but the thing that amazed me about McGriff is that he could play in any key. He'd play like All the Things You Are, or I can't remember right now, but some of the other tunes. But he would play them, and he would write down the set list, and he would give you the set list, and they'd say the key right next to it, the key we were going to play him in, and he would never play him in those keys.
Oh, key is just a suggestion.
Yeah. All of Me. That's a tune I was thinking of. He'd go through like, what do you want? Here, I'll do a 5. I'll put it in a new key. What, you don't like this key? Try this key.
He did it with Stella by Starlight too, which was
Stella.
Berserko.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of the people that you have played with. Anyone that you haven't worked with that you've wanted to, or that you plan on working with in the future?
No.
No one at all. There's no one that you'd like to work with.
I mean, I got to play with Elvin Jones. That's pretty much if God played drums, That's pretty much what that is.
Right. So, that's right. Yeah.
I played with Kenny Garrett, who I love his playing. He completely kicked my behind. I realized I'm not as modern as I thought I was. But no, I actually played with everybody that I wanted to play with. I've played with virtually everybody. I got to play with Shaka Khan, and I played with Larry Graham, and I've played with Madonna and everybody, Bonnie Raitt and all the luminaries in the R&B pop world. And I played with, Dolly Parton and, Frankie Valli and, Billy Joel. I've done all these kind of gigs too. So, and in jazz, I got to play with, Eubie Blake and Papa Joe Jones and Ram Ramirez, who wrote Lover Man, and Johnny Green, who wrote Body and Soul. I got to play Body and Soul with that. And Morton Gould, I got to play Impressions with Morton Gould, who wrote, that Coltrane played, which is also off on The Lamp is Low, which is that, which is a takeoff on Pavane. So I got to do that. I played with the Meters, and I played with Mickey and Sylvia, Mickey Baker, and the Spinners, and Al Green, and the Bee Gees, and John Denver, and so you get the idea. I played with everybody. So
you died. So you died and went to heaven before you got there.
That's right.
I've been really fortunate to have played, but definitely, I played with George, which is an out of body experience as a guitar player. There's no one that I've ever encountered that has that degree of guitar mastery. I just haven't seen it. I have played with everybody, Kenny Burrell and everybody in between, and but nobody could do what he can do and what he could do. And so to be around that kind of sheer genius was really inspiring. To be to actually play with that person, and that was one of the defining things. And of course, playing with Jimmy Smith was surreal because Jimmy played with George and Jimmy had played with Wes. And so when I'm there with Jimmy, it's like I'm aware of not only I better deliver the goods, but I'm standing on some giant shoulders of giants.
Right.
I'm I'm compared to what, and the what is Wes Montgomery and George Benson and Grant Green. So, and Thornell Schwartz and Kenny Burrell. I mean, all the people that played with him. So, I was aware of that too. I also played with Lionel Hampton, which he had Wes Montgomery in the band, and that's like, that's, there's nothing to say other than he had Wes Montgomery in the band. And of course, Lena Horne had Wes Montgomery in the band too. I think I told you that story, Benny, where Lena said one day to me, she said, I was playing something with my thumb, and she said, "That reminds me of that boy." Quote, verbatim quote, "That reminds me of that boy." I said, "What boy?" She said, "That boy I played guitar with me once when we went to Indianapolis somewhere. That boy, he played with his thumb." I said, "You mean Wes Montgomery?" She said, "Wes." Yeah, he said, "Yeah, he was so nice. How's he doing?"
Oh man.
And I said, "Oh, he's done very well. He's done very well, Lena. He said, "Oh, he was such a nice man. Played good too." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." That's like when I was like, working with Carly Simon, and I was working with her, and then the next night I had a gig with Jimmy Smith. So Jimmy called me. He's like, "Yeah, what time are you coming to the club?" I said, "Oh man, I can't talk right now, Jimmy. I'm getting ready to do this gig with Carly Simon." And he's like, "Who?" I said, "Carly Simon." He's like, "Who the heck is Carly Simon?" He didn't say heck either. "Who the heck is Carly Simon?" I was like, "Oh, she's just a singer. Don't worry about it,
She wrote a few songs,
Right.
She paid extremely well.
Yeah. So if you were to get an opportunity to play with, I mean, you've played with all the greats, but if you were to get an opportunity to go to heaven and have your pick of guys that you haven't had a chance to play with.
John Coltrane, point and blank, nobody else.
Nobody else. Same.
John Coltrane for me is the ultimate greatest
cut from the same cloth
jazz musician ever to do jazz, bar none, including everybody that I previously mentioned and anybody else that's to come.
Yeah.
His level of mastery, dedication, focus, spirituality is everything that I believe is good and beautiful about jazz, and I would hope to be any part of whatever that is. That's someone, if I could play with him, that would be the person.
Yeah.
And I actually had a dream where that happened. I had a dream where I was playing with him, and we did a whole set. We played the whole set, and afterwards he said, "Yeah, you sound very good." He said, "You sound." I said, "Oh, John," I said, "You have no idea what your music has meant to me and how much I've learned from you. You really don't know." He said, "Oh, thank you, man." I said, No, John, it's not like that. It's like, it's life changing. It's life giving. It's the reason I'm even doing this is that. So thank you. I learned so much from you." He said, "Oh man, thank you. I'm honored." And then I woke up.
It's amazing. What a dream.
But I mean, that's, if you want to have a dream, that's the dream to have.
For sure.
Talk a little bit about the sensibility that you have to have, not only to play with a singer, but to be the musical director of a singer. And I'm speaking of Lena Horne. And I remember so vividly, I was still kind of getting my wings, and George Benson gave me a nudge, and he said, "Look, man, anytime you can get a gig with a singer, do it, because you're going to learn more than just the melody, more than just the harmony. You really learn the body of the song." And the people that have an awareness of that dictate a whole different thing to the audience when they're playing instrumental music.
You're right. Well, I was Lena's music director for a long time, for more than 12 years. Also, Ruth Brown, the great R&B singer. Maria Lynn, whose big hit, "I Wish You Love," and Ernestine Anderson, and Brooke Benton. And that's just, musical director. Then I played with and recorded with like Dakota Staton, and Peggy Lee, and Sarah Vaughan, and Ella Fitzgerald, and Carmen McRae, and Diane Reeves, and Jasmine Horn, and all the flavors of the month that are out there now, and all of them. The thing I learned was subtlety and nuance, and the importance of that this, if I go, is different than, that's a different thing. Is different than, and when you're talking about music that's very sensitive and beautiful, I recorded today. I don't know how it's going to sound. I'll just play a second of it because I literally recorded this today just to practice on. If I can find it. If I can't find it, that's not going to matter. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I learned. Well, let's see. Like something like if I play, I'll use my thumb for example. If I play like so I think orchestrally, I think like the breaths and where the pauses should be versus playing guitar where you don't have to breathe, you can just keep going, But I think and dynamics, I think. Versus a guitar thing would be like, something like even guitar players that don't play, like someone like a great player like Peter Bernstein, who's like one of the finest people playing the instrument alive. The way he plays his touch and feeling is magnificent.
It is.
But not for a singer. Like he plays like he's playing guitar with a band or with solo guitar, but it's a different thing. I listen for the, where you would go like. And dynamics. I would never play that with a singer because there'd be no space for that. That would just throw them off. So it's not a slight on Peter. I mean, he's a master musician. Look, I was in the studio with Herbie Hancock playing for Lena Horne. Because Herbie Hancock was a piano player and with a trio. And Lena was singing Willow Weep for Me and Chelsea Bridge. And Herbie played, they did Chelsea Bridge and Herbie played. I mean, as a guitar player, as a musician, I died and went to heaven. And Lena hated it because it was jazz. It was like for Miles Davis.
Yeah.
There was it didn't feel like he'd ever played for a singer. So after he left, Lena was like, we're not using that. She said, can you call Mike Renzi, who's one of the great accompanists of our time, played for Lena and Peggy Lee and Torme, and one of the greatest of all time, like Bill Evans, but for singers. Mike Renzi came in the next day and he played the first chord. He was like, Lena was like, thank God. He knew exactly what to do. He played something like. Silence. He was right there, like he was listening. You could tell that he was waiting. He was playing all the breaths. He knew the words. He was playing the lyric.
Yeah.
And Lena, she was used to that. it wasn't Mike. Look, Herbie Hancock is a genius, maybe the greatest genius alive today in jazz. But for accompanying a singer like that, something different, you know.
Yeah, it is.
It's just a different animal. So, you know, I mean, you know, Ted Green, genius, but not for singers, you know. You know, it just depends. It's a different art. I think Joe Pass had some of that. I think Joe Pass was able to do that because his work with Ella. I think he had the sensibility and knew the heritage of the song. He knew those standards so well that he knew where the lyric was leading him and what was supposed to happen. But if you don't have that kind of experience, it really is something that I got trained to do, like, you know, like baptism by fire, because it was so obvious the first time you don't do that. And she's like, and you never forget that time when you get stared at because you screwed up.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll never forget that. So that didn't happen again. Every time I got that spot, I remember, no, you don't play right here. You wait. You know, and so eventually she gave me enough time to get it together, as Dizzy did too. You know, Dizzy gave me enough time to get up to speed. You know,
Yeah.
I asked Dizzy like one time, only one time, I said, Dizzy, what do you want me to play? He said, what do I want you to play? He said, well, if I tell you what to play, then I'm the guitar player and I don't need you in the band. I was like, okay, I see your point. I never asked him what to play again.
Never ask him. Yeah. You know, I was in the studio one time playing with Keeter Betts, and I forget what tune we were playing, but it was a ballad. And he was giving Steve Williams, who was playing, he was giving him a hard time, you know, play the tempos like you play with Shirley Horn, Steve.
Oh, that's hard.
And he was going, come on, man. I want to get away from that, you know, this kind of thing. And so they had this banter going back and forth. So I played the intro, and Keeter says to me, well, it's clear you don't know the verse.
Right.
And I said, what? You mean I got to know a verse on this too?
Oh.
And he was right. I didn't know the verse. I didn't know the story behind the verse. I didn't know.
They're always in a different key. The verse is
always in a different key.
I know.
So he took me to school that day.
Yeah, well, Lena never used to like an intro that they gave away the song. Like, this is too. She didn't want anything to give away the key. She wanted to be something that left her first note as a surprise.
Ah.
So you. So you've got to. She didn't like that. She would always say play a strange chord. So I got into playing these kind of chords like. And there'd be a space. She used to love that. Like, the weirder the chord, the better, because she was like, it cleanses the palate. If you play that chord, it cleanses the ears. And you leave a space, and the space is open, and then I breathe, and I sing the first note.
That's amazing.
And I learned the importance of that, you know, and actually, you know, no one since has had that degree of self-awareness about that level of nuance. And no other singer that I ever played with had that much depth. They hired me because I did that for Lena, but when I did it for them, they weren't really equipped to do it. Right. I wrote arrangements, like Lena Horne type of arrangements for several people. Like Ruth Brown did it beautifully. I did a record for her called The Songs of My Life, where she sung jazz ballads and she crushed it, you know. But some of the other singers, I wrote those guys, they'd say, oh, right, like you would for Lena Horne. But really what they want is to. Because they're used to that kind of the Chitlin circuit or just like the jazz gig. And I used to playing for an orchestra. You know, I did tons of orchestra gigs with Lena, with a conductor and, you know, and wrote arrangements. And, you know, so you know when the conductor goes, this is the thing, like the ictus, the before you play the downbeat, you tell the orchestra by the way you do that what the feeling is. If you go like this, that means something different than if you go down and up. It's different than if you just go up. If you go out, you go up and wait. Those are all telling the orchestra the feeling of the tune. But I don't play with any jazz musicians ever that even have that awareness. It's like 1, 2, 1. And I'm like, no. But, you know.
Yeah.
That's
my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Bye.